At Sephora, we've got what you want because you're obsessed with your skin and we're obsessed with what it needs. Sephora has the best products to help you get beautiful, glowing, radiant skin. With an extensive, inclusive range of results-driven formulas and in-store beauty advisors to help you find exactly which are right for you, the best skincare is only at Sephora. Sephora, for all your skincare.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. I have been getting increasingly concerned about the role of technology in our society. I find myself relying on technology more and more, whether it's just the internet or whether it's AI or whether it's email. I'm increasingly becoming perpetually plugged in to a digital world. And I realized a while ago that I have kind of forgotten what it's like to be bored. And then on the economic front and the news front, I'm looking at what's going on with the dock workers and their fight against automation. And I'm thinking, well, maybe eventually we're all going to be replaced by some sort of artificial intelligence and automation. Increasingly, meetings that used to be community meetings, whether they're community board meetings, PTA meetings, they're increasingly being done by digital, Zoom, remote meetings rather than in person. What does this all mean for society? What does this all mean for our brains? Someone who has been exploring these issues is Christine Rosen, a very accomplished person. She's a senior fellow, or in her case, I suppose, a senior gal at the American Enterprise Institute. She's a columnist for Commentary Magazine, and she's the author of this new book that everybody is talking about. It's called The Extinction of Experience, Being Human in a Disembodied World, and the subjects that she talks about in the book are more relevant now than ever. Christine Rosen, it's great to talk with you. Thanks for joining me on the radio.
Thanks for having me on.
So, The Extinction of Experience, Being Human in a Disembodied World. Why'd you write this book? Why are you trying to be the ant at the picnic here?
Or skunk at the garden party, yes. Well, I found actually that in my own life, I was, as you described, spending more and more time staring at a tiny screen in my hand, in the case of my smartphone, or at a desktop computer. And when I wanted to talk to people, I noticed others having the same challenge of feeling awkward and kind of losing some of our human skills we used to take for granted. And I thought, I wonder if we're the only ones. And I started looking into some of the research in social science and cultural history. And what I found is that although we think we're very adaptable, actually our old-fashioned evolutionary developed brains move very slowly with new things. We like new things, but it takes us some time to adjust. So I wanted to describe and explore some of the ways in which our adjustments to technology might not actually be helping us be better people, be more thriving human beings, but in fact have undermined some of our deeply human needs and skills.
So a lot of those deeply human needs include the need for companionship, for company, for communication, for connection with others. And it would seem that social media, which allows me to be in touch with my brother-in-law in California and my cousins in Texas just as easily as my parents half a mile away, it would seem that on the surface, social media allows an ease of communication and connection with people that we may not get an opportunity to connect with on a regular basis. Why does that portend anything negative? Why is that something other than all positive?
Well, that was certainly the promise, right? Like social media would be the new town square. You'd be able to stay in touch with everyone you care about, and they could get in touch with you. The challenge, though, is that those are qualitatively different connections than the kind we have with the people who we see day in and day out and face to face. The people you know on social media, even if they're people you sometimes spend time with in person, we're often now finding people will prefer to communicate via social media or the screen or a text message rather than actually inconveniencing themselves by leaving the house and, looking presentable and going and seeing someone. And at the end of the day, the question I always ask people is, who's going to show up to pick you up from the airport? Who's going to show up with some soup or something to help you when you're sick? That's real community. And it's wonderful that we can stay in touch with people all over the world who we happen to know and meet. But at the end of the day, as humans, we still need those real face-to-face, in-person communities to thrive. And a lot of people now are choosing to spend most of their time, an average 7 hours a day, talking through screens, living through screens, rather than living with each other in space, in human space, looking at each other face-to-face.
One of the social media entities that is villainized, I think, in the media and is warned about for a variety of reasons, whether it's data collection, whether it's the ownership of the company, whether it's the addictive nature of the algorithm, is TikTok. Now, I'm not on TikTok, but I've heard a lot of stories about TikTok. It seems like half the stories in the news these days come from some sort of a TikTok trend. What's your read on TikTok and what TikTok does to the human brain, juxtaposed by what the evolutionary needs of humanity are?
Well, TikTok, like a lot of video sites, really capture you by giving you content that is almost impossible to look away from, and continuing to give you more and more and more of the same thing. So once you like a video or watch a video on TikTok, it's going to just keep feeding you more of the same. The algorithm is designed to give you more of what you said you like. And it's difficult to look away. You lose track of time. It's kind of modeled and designed just like gambling machines in Las Vegas are designed. They want to keep your attention. They don't care how you feel as long as you are giving the app your attention. So setting aside the fact that if you have TikTok, you're also giving your data to the Communist Chinese Party, I would encourage everybody to get it off their phone if they have it. You're also habituating your mind, and this is really important for young people, habits of mind that leave you unable to not have that sort of stimulation. So if you sit down and try to read a book after going through, spending an hour scrolling through stuff on TikTok, you'll find it's more challenging because your brain is having to reach down and have different reserves of attention that those platforms actually undermine.
I've seen it with myself, even not being on TikTok, but being on other forms of social media and email all day. I find it much more challenging to read a lengthy article. I used to be able to read a lengthy article without even thinking about it. Now I find I actually have to put a little bit of effort in to finish a whole article. And I don't know what's changed, but the manner in which I'm consuming information on a regular basis. At 30 minutes after the hour, you're listening to The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Christine Rosen. She's with the American Enterprise Institute, but she's the author of this book, The Extinction of Experience, Being Human in a Disembodied World. One of the things you do touch upon a bit, Christine, is something I've noticed, is that with more of us getting our news and our entertainment from social media and other digital platforms, online conspiracy culture has really thrived. And, on our radio show, we've tried to play into this. And when they upload different segments that we've done from the radio show, inevitably, the ones of me talking about a different conspiracy are always the ones that get the most virality, that get the most shares, that get the most attention. What is it about the online community and social media that lead to a proliferation of a conspiracy culture?
Well, in some sense, we've always, it's funny, if you study American history, Americans have always loved conspiracies and been interested in them. The difference now is that, instead of just finding maybe one or two other people in your town who agree with you on whatever the conspiracy theory is, you can now find hundreds of thousands and millions of people online who also subscribe to this conspiracy. Everybody has their own evidence. Everybody then, at a certain point, can manufacture their own reality about a subject. And it is that lack of a shared reality that worries me about the future, and not just in our politics. But the fact that if we're spending 7 to 9 hours every day staring at a screen, and a lot of that time is spent in these worlds that have been manufactured to just keep feeding us more of what we already believe and not challenging our ideas and not giving us an alternative view, that makes it very difficult when someone believes something that's wrong or that could even be harmful to them, to persuade them otherwise, to offer competing evidence, to really sit down and do the thing that in a democracy we're all supposed to be able to do, which is argue about stuff in a way that it seeks to change people's minds. And so the conspiracy culture thrives in part because we lack a shared reality. but also because we're becoming a more mistrustful society. Some of our institutions do lie to us. We saw this during COVID.
Right.
So I think a lot of people also turn to alternative sources because the previously trusted sources, whether that's the mainstream media, whether that's the government, have actually told them things that aren't true, and they know that now. So I think that lack of trust is another serious consideration when we think about the kind of lives we want to lead, where we get our information, and the integrity of the information that we're consuming.
You mentioned COVID. One of the things that has come out of COVID and has largely stayed with us is the prevalence of Zoom meetings, virtual meetings. Now everything is a virtual meeting. What's the harm, right? If I'm going to have a conversation with my son's teacher, if I'm going to participate in a community board meeting, if I'm going to participate in any sort of a fantasy football draft, whatever, what's the harm in enjoying the convenience of walking down the hall of my house rather than driving 20, 30 minutes away and meeting with all these people in person? Is there anything bad about the virtual meeting culture versus the in-person meeting culture?
There are a few things. I mean, if it's the only option, it's better than nothing. So I get that, especially like if you work in a business where people are all over the world, all working for the same team, and they need to connect on a regular basis. Zoom is great for that. There are two problems, though. One is when it starts to replace the in-person connections, like coming into the office, where you bump into people who maybe aren't in your department or from a different side of the office. And that's actually how creativity and new ideas come. And there are interesting studies of businesses that encourage people to kind of cross paths with others. Often these are creative industries. Pixar designed a building so that people would bump into each other in the atrium from accounting, and they are in animation. And so, but this led to interesting, productive discussions that then down the line made employees happier and also made the company more profitable because people were interacting, and we read each other's bodily signals in ways that we can't on Zoom. There's been a lot of research about this. A smile done over Zoom is going to give you, it's a pleasant feeling to be smiled at by someone on the screen, but it's very different when someone's sitting across the table from you and smiles. These are two quality experiences. So I worry about us replacing those in-person experiences, and I worry what it does in office culture where people just don't bump into each other. They don't have these serendipitous interactions as often, and those are crucial, although they're not easy to quantify.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor, or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the U.S. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a U.S.-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
If you're just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. This is The Other Side of Midnight. We're talking with Christine Rosen. In terms of the boundaries between virtual and real life, you indicate that they get blurred a bit because of the virtual rat race that we're in these days. How so? How do those lines get blurred?
So there's some interesting studies about, we used to say IRL, in real life, or like go touch grass and then you can go back online. But because of the mobility of our technology, mainly the smartphone, and coming down the pipe, lots of sensors we'll be able to actually physically wear on our bodies, we can't really ever escape this stuff now. It's part of our daily lives most of the time. So what that means, though, for memory formation, Zoom, again, here is a good example. When we were a lot of us locked down in COVID, and we were doing lots of things on Zoom, not just our jobs, not just our kids' schooling, but then I watched, friends would gather on Zoom and we'd have a social meeting, or you'd, go to a wedding on Zoom and stuff. Interestingly, though, we need bounded horizons to form real memories. And so as everyone knows, you spend a whole day staring at a screen doing lots of different things. Try to recall specifics about what you were doing throughout the day and the timing of it. You'll find it's difficult for your brain to do that compared to if you were in physical space, bodily moving from one point to the other, one meeting to one errand. So there's something about how we encode memories that's different when we live online. And so again, some online time is fine, but when most of us are spending most of our time online, that's changing even how we form memories and how we value each other as human beings.
One of the things that I've talked about a great deal is that it seems like every generation of adults loves to shake their fist at the current generation of young people, particularly whatever entertainment or technology they seem to enjoy. In the 18th century, reading was considered an addictive and disruptive technology. Then when radios came about, parents were concerned about their children frittering their days on the radio all day long. Then television comes about, and this radio generation is concerned with their children all becoming couch potatoes. Then the couch potatoes that were addicted to TV are concerned about their children playing video games. Then the video game generation is concerned about their kids being on the smartphone all day long on things like TikTok. Do you think humans are just doomed to always fear new technology, or is there something genuinely more dangerous about today's innovations?
Well, the difference today, I do think that we adapt. We always have, as you said, all of those examples. People poo-pooed, I remember, there was history books about how when women were reading fiction, they thought that was going to rot their brains. The difference, I'll give you two different things. One is that the things we use now read us back, in the sense that the old comic books, which people thought would dumb down a generation of kids, the kid would just read the comic book. Now the comic book reads you, reads your signals, it reads your it can track your eye movements, it knows how long you spent on each page, and then that information is sent back out to a technology company, to an advertiser, to who knows where else, because we all sign those terms of service without reading them. So in that sense, it's a lot more invasive. Many of these technologies, many of these platforms. There's also the problem of speed and scale. We've had very little time to adjust to this new technology, mobile technology in particular, the internet in your pocket all the time, all day, every day. We had decades to adjust to television, to radio, to other new technologies, particularly when those technologies were in our private homes and in disrupting some of the rhythms of family life. And so I think with this, we haven't adjusted that well. And, we see this with social media. When it first came out, everyone was saying, oh, this is wonderful. A few of us were like, not every new thing is an improvement on an old thing. Sometimes the new thing isn't as good. And that's when we should start asking questions about whether it disrupts our values, whether it undermines our relationships, and whether it might have long-term unintended consequences for people. So we're starting to do that now with social media, which is good. It's about 10 years too late. But I think whenever we have one of these new technologies, we should start by asking those questions, not wait for 10 years for mental health epidemics, for problems to arise, and then try to reverse engineer it, because by then it's too late.
Over the last 15, 20 years or so, there's been an erosion of the teaching of handwriting in schools, cursive, script. Last few years, some schools have been bringing it back, but ironically, a lot of the teachers that are now tasked with teaching handwriting don't know it because they didn't learn it when they were in school. Give me your take on the importance of cursive. Does it matter that children still learn handwriting, and if so, why?
It does. So there's sort of a philosophical argument for it that I like, because I'm a historian. So we have we have several generations of Americans now who can't read our founding documents. The founding documents are written in cursive. They can't read cursive. They're advertising, Coca-Cola and other places that advertise in script are thinking about changing their logos because people can't read them. So that's one philosophical thing. But we actually have scientific evidence about what learning first to print and then to write in script does for your brain and for later memory recall and literacy. It turns out that mind-body connection is hugely important. It slows you down when you form each letter, and then when you have to learn to connect the letters in cursive, it does something even more fascinating in the brain. And neuroscience research is giving us a real insight into what is lost when we don't teach that. You miss a crucial building block of literacy later on. You miss some crucial building blocks for memory retention and recall. So we know this now, and I think we rushed forward to think, oh, this is like a buggy whip. You won't need to write cursive. Who cares about that? Let's move on to keyboarding and swipe screens and everything. But it turns out there was value in that we didn't fully understand and appreciate. And so I'm very heartened to see that more and more educators want to go back to teaching script. I'll give you one funny anecdote, though, too. There were bakers who were hired by a bakery, and what they found is that they couldn't pipe "Happy Birthday" in icing on the cake because none of them could write well in cursive. so there are all these weird little ways in which this skill that we allow to deteriorate turns out to have some value, not just aesthetic, not just philosophical, but actually it matters to how we learn to read and retain knowledge.
Talk to me about boredom. Is boredom something to be stamped out or to be celebrated?
Well, hopefully your listeners have experienced none of it so far in our
Exactly.
So they
of that I'm certain.
Well, so I became fascinated by boredom because I was looking at how impatient our society seems and what we do with our time, and particularly what we do with our time when we have like a minute or two to waste, right? Almost all of us, I speak for myself here too, pick up our phones, check our messages, look at something online, play Candy Crush, do something with a device. And what that means is that we actually, two things. We're not learning the discipline of how to be bored, because when you don't have that phone, it's much harder to wait. So we become more impatient. But we also lose that interstitial time when you let your brain just rest and kind of your mind can wander. And again, that we know from history, we know especially from the lives of inventors and other creative people. It's when your mind wanders that new ideas are sparked. It's when you least expect it. It's why you think of having an idea when you're in the shower. Your brain's kind of wandering around, you're doing a routine thing, but your mind is wandering. We don't do that when we're always giving ourselves the stimulation of our technology and our phones in particular. So I think we do need to learn how to be bored, because there are going to come times in everyone's life where you don't have access to that sort of stimulation, and you have to be able to just sit and be and not freak out and having to do that.
Your book obviously explores how technology is transforming our sense of self. Do you think there's an irony in the fact that many people are going to read your book through a digital device? How do you reconcile kind of the benefits of technology with the damage that it might do to the human experience?
Yes, I call this the Kindle paradox, right? This is I have a lot of friends who, especially as they age, really prefer the Kindle because of the lighting it gives to the page. I'm a big fan of paper books. I still read a lot of paper books. I still get newspapers delivered to my house.
Same.
That's how retro I am. But we can't put that genie back in the bottle, and I wouldn't argue that we should. So I make productive use of these technologies every day myself. What I would encourage people to do is just have some awareness of that. One thing that you're reading a book in print form, Amazon will know you bought it, but it's not going to track how long it takes you to read it or if you finish it. You do that on a Kindle. The Kindle is also gathering data. Now, you can turn some of those things off, but, again, the device has other intentions beyond just being a book for you. And I think, again, every time we do something now that's mediated, people should ask, well, who benefits? Who is this for? Who is gaining information about my personal experience right now? That's important. These are important questions for thinking about the kind of society we have, respect for privacy and individualism and human freedom.
In talking to you, obviously, it's clear that you're concerned, and I think you've convinced me and a lot of people listening to be concerned about surveillance technology, and taking people's data. It's clear that you're not getting the same sort of connection with someone through a Zoom meeting as you are in person. It's clear that a lot of other things are being lost. I guess one of my biggest concerns now is, now that we know the problem, what do we do about it? Either for ourselves, how can we kind of unplug and not be a part of the problem? And as parents, what can parents do to make sure they're not raising the next generation of techno zombies?
Well, first of all, for parents, you delay screens as long as possible and give your kids a phone-free childhood where they go outdoors and they muck around, and you let them figure out their fun, as it were. You give them a bunch of blocks and say, build something, and then you let them do it. And they'll fail, they'll fall over, they'll get frustrated, but they will learn to do things using their own brains and their own hands without constant stimulation. We need to teach that. We need to teach patients. These are habits of mind and habits of physical bodies where we have to learn them, and we've got to practice them. So we also then, as parents and as adults in general, need to practice what we preach. So we need to model good behavior. Don't push your kid in a stroller down the street while talking on your phone. Your kid needs to hear your voice interacting with him or her in that stroller, pointing things out, talking, chatting. So I think we use these as shortcuts in life, and sometimes they're necessary, but they're not always required. So I would always say, if you can do it without the technology, do that first. But particularly for kids, you need to give them those phone-free experiences, because so many kids today are learning about the world through a screen rather than through direct hands-on experience with it.
I read several of the reviews of your book. I thought several were interesting. There was one section of the Rosen magazine critique of your book that I thought was pretty interesting, and I wanted to ask your take about it. And it has to do with phone calls. It's no secret, and it's certainly anecdotally true in my life, that phone calls, regular person-to-person voice phone calls, have gradually been replaced with text messaging, with email, with things of that nature. And the review and reason basically says that by your standards, voice calls are superior to text messaging and emails. But by getting a voice call, we're basically prioritizing and answering that call. We're prioritizing the person calling over the person that we're interacting with in real life. Whereas if someone sends a text message or an email, I'll get around to responding to that text message when I get a chance. Explain to us that kind of dichotomy, why voice phone calls are better, or at least not more conducive to how our brains are hardwired on an evolutionary basis, as opposed to text messages.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually am I had written, that review was funny. I was also accused of wanting to bring back smallpox, which I definitely don't.
I wasn't going to bring that part up, but I'll give you a break on that one.
But what's fascinating to me is that 20 years ago, when mobile phone technology first became ubiquitous, I started to study people's behavior, and I actually did argue in several essays in various journals that picking up that phone call is bad too, because in public space, you're making a power move by doing that. And we all see in the early cell phone, those of us who remember the early cell phone days, the very ostentatious display of power of the person who had the cell phone and was getting an important call, and suddenly everyone else around them was less important. So the status seeking that the technology allowed people has now been tamped down, or we've become adjusted to it. But the human voice is full of inflections and tone that you can't get on a text message. It's why everybody wants to use emojis, because it kind of attempts to do a digital version of that. So the phone is better than the text. But you know what? Being in person and looking someone in the eye is better than the phone. So all of these are qualitative differences, and we can't always have the best experience of being face-to-face with someone and having conversation in person. But now we have to actively choose to do that, because it's so much easier to do everything else. So what was interesting to me about that review, and although it was very typical of a libertarian attitude, which is that, everyone always complains, but technology is all good and we'll adjust and it'll be fine. actually we're not all fine. If you look at our politics, if you look at the state of mental health of our teenagers in this country, if you look at the weird lack of a shared reality and declining rates of trust as a culture, we're not doing that great. And we have these amazing tools. So I really would push back on that and say, yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, some people think technology is going to be fine for them. But if you step back and give a 30,000-foot view, we're not always making the best use of these tools. And I think part of it's their design, but part of it's also that they exploit aspects of human nature that we need to be more cognizant of going forward.
Finally, Christine, as you mentioned, you are a historian. Based on what you see for humanity's future, are we all going to be killed by some sort of AI killer robot like in the Terminator? I mean, we're done, right? We're done.
No. So this is where I do become kind of less of a Cassandra and more of a rabble rouser, and say we have to know if we choose to defend the human. There are plenty of people, particularly in Silicon Valley, who think that it'd be better for the world if people who didn't like their lives could just slap on VR goggles and live online all the time and do whatever they want online. I think that's a dystopian horror show, because I think what we owe each other is harder to accomplish, but much more important for decent human behavior. And that's that we need to help improve the actual physical world that we live in and in our relationships with each other and our politics and our culture, instead of just shrugging and saying, oh, well, we have this technology, we'll just live online because that's better. I can control my whole universe and never have to answer to others. We do best when we do have to compromise, and we do have to negotiate, and we do have to answer to others, when we have to show up for each other. So I do become quite adamant and very, very anti-Silicon Valley when I look at some of the futures that they're trying to spin for us and sell us. And I don't think that future has any place for human freedom and for individuality and for privacy. And so that does concern me. And so people need to defend the human in their daily lives, but also be cognizant of how they're using these tools and who's benefiting from their use of them.
Christine Rosen, her book is The Extinction of Experience, Being Human in a Disembodied World. Christine, I enjoyed the conversation very much. Good luck with the book.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, you can give me a call, 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced, specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor, or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.